We have a crisis in American policing. I think that is widely recognized. I think it's acknowledged. But I don't think what's widely recognized and what's being acknowledged is that the solutions or the recipes to correct that crisis that are being used in this country are not producing the results that we're looking for. In fact, it's exacerbating the problem. And I think that what's happening is there's a conversation about law enforcement that doesn't include law enforcement. And I think that what's happening is those methods that are being applied are emboldening criminals and rendering police ineffective, which in my book is taking us down a road towards lawlessness. And I think we're seeing that in a number of different places, in a number of different ways. Now, let me say first that it's my opinion that I don't think any one of those young black men that we've seen who have died at the hands of police, almost without exception, because there's always exceptions, needed to die. The police have to do better. We have to do better with better training, with better supervision, and definitely with better tactics. Because almost every one of those situations that I've encountered and looked at looks like they were tactical errors that were made that put those officers in a position that they had to use deadly physical force. So let me get that out of the way. The police have to do better. The police absolutely have to do better. But I think the problem is being misdiagnosed. And as a result, we're taking the wrong medicine for what ails us, which is making the problem worse instead of better. And I'll take you through that. Probably the best example that I could give you of what really strikes at the heart of this to me is the fact that criminals are non-compliant by their very nature. We know that. My greatest concern is that the non-compliance that runs through virtually every one of those tragic events that we see is being legitimized. And in my book, this actually is the bedrock foundation of the United States Constitution. Compliance. Compliance with the police, compliance with the law. And the legitimizing of that non-compliance is happening on a number of different levels. And it's happening in a number of different venues. And the best example that I could give you is a recent example in Chicago, where a young man stole a car, a young African-American man, stole a vehicle, took the police on a high-speed chase, crashed that vehicle purposely into a police car at 50 miles an hour, causing a violent confrontation. And he ends up dead. Now, the police may have acted improperly and out of policy, and they should pay for that. I need to say that. If the police act outside the law, they should be prosecuted like any other United States citizen. Absolutely, positively. And if they act outside of policy, they need to be disciplined. That's how we keep policies intact in policing. But in this case, the narrative is not about what that young man did. It's only about what the police did. I've yet to hear anybody say, the police are being castigated for this incident, by the way, but I've yet to hear anybody say, I have an idea if we want to prevent these incidents from happening. A, don't steal a car. Amen. B, don't take the police on a high-speed chase. And C, definitely do not crash that car into a police car, causing a violent confrontation, and then complain when something bad happens as a result. Something bad had already happened. Now, how is it that this is happening? Why is this happening? It's happening on a number of different levels. But I want to introduce you to a social sociology concept. It's called legal cynicism. And this is when I'm talking about the issue being misdiagnosed. Do you know that police-related shootings in the city of Chicago are less than half of 1% of the shootings in the city of Chicago? I'm going to say that again. Less than half of 1% of the shootings in the city of Chicago. And it's my opinion that the problems that are vexing the African-American community, that are resulting in attempts to fix the police, are social and economic problems that at their core have this concept of legal cynicism. And legal cynicism is a cultural orientation in which the law and its agents of enforcement are viewed as illegitimate, unresponsive, and ill-equipped to ensure public safety. Think about what this says. The law and its agents of enforcement. So we're not just talking about the police. We're talking about prosecutors. We're talking about judges. We're talking about the law itself. We're talking about correctional facilities. We're talking about everything in that system. That's legal cynicism. And what I think we're seeing is legal cynicism on steroids. Because if you think about it, and I know you have, at the end of the day, the disenfranchised community that's overrun by poverty, lack of education, mass incarceration, causing the breakup of the family unit, lead in the water, poor health care, no mental health care. You name the issue that exists in that community. Anger wells up at a government system that is not providing the basic elements that those communities need. That anger is being focused on the most forward and visible component of that failed government system. And who is that? That's the police. So what I'm telling you is, fixing the police is not going to change those societal conditions that exist in those neighborhoods. And 5 years from now, we're going to be having the same conversation. Now, why is this happening? And who is accountable? Because accountability doesn't just apply to the police. We're empowering criminals and rendering the police ineffective, and people are dying as a result. The methods that we're using, the medicines that we're applying, are making the situation worse. Now, who's to blame? I already told you the police have to do better. No two ways about it. Please don't think that I'm saying anything different. But I'm going to give you some other thoughts and some other people who are helping to empower criminals. I can't help it, but I have to start with the media. The media no longer engages in journalism. What they're doing is they're competing for ratings, like TMZ. The gorier, the more controversial, the better for the press. And I want you to think about the way that things are presented. Everybody knows the story of Eric Garner in New York City. It's now become the illegal chokehold death of Eric Garner. I got two facts that nobody realizes. A, the chokehold was not illegal. It was against department policy. So it was outside policy. It was not against the law. And B, the coroner says that Eric Garner died from chest compression. In other words, somebody was sitting on his back during that scrum trying to arrest him. He did not die from a chokehold. But try putting that genie back in the bottle, because it's the illegal chokehold death of Eric Garner. I was aghast. Last week I woke up. First thing I always do, just to get myself annoyed, is I turn on the television and watch the news. The anger keeps me focused. And what did I see? The tagline on the bottom said, New Mexico police officer killed in shootout with offender, but it's unclear who fired first. What? Are you kidding me? And then the other thing that I saw, think about how the press presents things. I'm watching the demonstrations in Charlotte after the police shooting. And what did I see? I saw people jumping up and down on top of police cars, breaking windows, property damage. Those people were called demonstrators. I think they were criminals. And the police were called riot police. Just attach the word riot to police and think about it. And how many times have you seen them now revel when they say another police shooting caught on video? We're empowering criminals through the media, through the perception. And what's happening? What's happening is we're ending up with police officers getting murdered in places like Dallas, Baton Rouge, New York City, and most recently, Iowa. The second component, elected officials. Elected officials are trying to legislate good policing. You can't legislate good policing. They came up with something called the Community Relations Improvement Act in Springfield, which results in a 2-page report every time a police officer conducts a stop. It's akin to conducting a robbery investigation rather than filling out a card saying you stopped Garry McCarthy, this is where, this is when, this is why. Elected officials campaign on the new lexicon, police violence. They campaign on police violence. They support community leaders, and community leaders, this is a segue to community leaders. They support community leaders who go out and shut down Michigan Avenue. Those community leaders, I actually heard somebody from Black Lives Matter on TV going to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland and said that he was going there, he was not going to comply with the police, he was encouraging everybody else not to comply with the police, and he was going to get a gun and bring it with him. This is empowering criminals. At the same time, whether or not you know it, during those protests on Michigan Avenue, police officers were assaulted all day long. We have photographs of a leader, a community leader, punching a police officer in the face. We arrested him and couldn't get him prosecuted. The charges were dropped by the state's attorney. This is empowering criminals. The last component that's really important in this dynamic is government. And this goes from the top to the bottom. Now, my comments are specific to Chicago for obvious reasons. I know a little bit about what happens in Chicago. But I was also the vice president of the Major City Chiefs Association, and this is about policing nationally. And when I say from the top to the bottom, the Department of Justice, in my mind, is getting people killed in America today. That's a controversial statement, but I could tell you this. DOJ is in Chicago right now, investigating our patterns and practices. And DOJ will tell you very proudly, and by the way, this is the politicizing of the Department of Justice, which you may or may not have noticed, maybe a little bit in this national election that's going on. DOJ will tell you proudly that they've opened 22 investigations into civil rights violations by police departments in the last 8 years, and that's more than any other time in history. They're very proud of that. By the way, any officer who violates somebody's civil rights needs to be prosecuted, no two ways about it. I have to be clear about this. I'm not being soft on police officers. But the standard that DOJ is using, this is terrible. The Supreme Court of the United States says that the police can stop somebody based upon something called articulable, reasonable suspicion. And they found this in the 1968 case of Terry versus Ohio. That's what the highest court in the land says. The Department of Justice is investigating patterns and practices of police departments based upon population demographics. And they say that we're disproportionately stopping African Americans across the country. Now, I want you to think about this. The most violent community in Chicago is Englewood. Englewood happens to be 97% African American. As a result, we put more officers there. And the standard under DOJ has it that in a community of 97% African Americans, we're supposed to stop 32% white people. It's really not funny. It's preposterous. Because that community deserves protection. And the very people that they're trying to protect are the ones who are losing their lives. Where were we in Chicago? During my 4.5-year tenure as police superintendent, we had about a 40% reduction in overall crime. We had back-to-back years in 2013 and 2014 of the lowest murder rate in Chicago since 1965. And by the way, it was too many. It was 405 and 415, which is not okay. But where are we today? Oh, by the way, we had back-to-back years of 50% reductions in complaints against our officers by civilians. We had a 20,000 less arrests over a 2-year period, yet a 23% increase in gun arrests. So we weren't just locking up everybody, because mass incarceration is real. It's not about arresting everybody, it's about arresting the right person at the right place at the right time for the right reason. And that's how you reduce crime. And most significantly, if you don't know it, there was a 68% reduction in police-related shootings during my tenure as police superintendent in Chicago. 68%. And that was because of better supervision, better policies, better review practices, and better training. But one shooting has flipped over the table in Chicago, Laquan McDonald. That officer has to answer for what he did that day. That officer has to answer. But we're empowering criminals and hamstringing the police through all these policies that I talked about and all these things that are happening. And what's the result? In Chicago this year, we've got 4,000 people shot already. Take a moment and chew on that. 4,000 people shot in Chicago this year. Stops are down by the police by 95%. Well, what did we think was going to happen? If they arrest somebody, they don't get prosecuted, and if you stop the wrong person, the officer can go to jail. What effect is that having on the crime rate? The likelihood is we're definitely going to go past 700 murders. We're going to go past 700 murders. It's likely that we're going to hit 750. Now, I want to put that in perspective for you, because the worst year that New York City ever had was 1990, and there were 2,245 people murdered in New York City in 1990. That was at the height of the crack epidemic. That's before proactive policing existed. Chicago is 1/3 the size of New York City, so let's do the math together. That means that we're going to hit the murder rate that New York City had 26 years ago when the world was a different place. There are no political solutions for practical problems. We can't engage in a game of look at the squirrel. Every action has a reaction. And while we're spending this time trying to fix the police, I love the saying that we're going to fix police-community relations. We're going to reestablish police-community relations. Well, you can't reestablish something that didn't exist in the first place. Because I want you to think about the history of African Americans in this country. 400-year history, maybe longer, that started with slavery, went to black codes. From there, Jim Crow. And after that, segregation. I can't believe, as I stand here, that segregation existed in my lifetime. I think it was 1964 is when the Civil Rights Bill was signed. That narrative of distrust is well earned by the police because we were the ones, the white police officers, who were enforcing those racist laws. They were laws, ladies and gentlemen, that were on the books, and we enforced them. So if you can reverse 300 years, 400 years of history, then you can reestablish trust. The solution lies in first identifying the problem. There's a social and economic divide in this country, and people are angry about it. We're taking the wrong medicine for what ails us. People are dying as a result. This is not just in Chicago. This is in places like Cleveland, Baltimore. New York is staying at the level that it got down to because it stayed the course. It didn't reverse field as soon as we hit choppy waters. I was in charge of New York City's crime strategy for 7 years. Very proud of it. People are dying as a result of what we're doing. And until we recognize the issue and have a conversation with law enforcement about law enforcement, until we start coming up with solutions instead of knee-jerk political reactions to curry favor politically, this is going to continue. I was actually on a Don Lemon show a while back at a town hall meeting where I actually made the offer to Black Lives Matter to sit down with the leadership and law enforcement in this country, because I can do that because they're my friends. And there was tacit approval. They all took my cards. I haven't heard from one yet. But the next day, I got right on the phone and I started calling my friends, and they said, Gary, I spoke to the president of Major City Chiefs, the president of IACP. They said, Gary, we were just at a meeting with the president of the United States, Barack Obama. He made the same offer. It was declined. It's got to start with a conversation and a recognition of what's happening. People are dying in record numbers as a result of what we're doing. The politicizing of this issue is disgraceful. But if we're satisfied with what's happening, then by all means, let's keep doing it. Thank you.